Looks like we have already a great attendance. I'd like to introduce you to everybody and get started. We're just about on time, so I will start and the introductions, okay? So I'm James Herron. I'm the head of marketing here at Vendict, and I'm thrilled to be hosting our latest webinar. Today, we have an incredible guest joining us, someone truly fascinating in the world of AI ethics. We have Ravit Dotan with us, an AI ethics advisor, researcher, and speaker. Ravit has made it her mission to transform AI ethics into a powerful business asset for tech companies, security teams, GRC teams, and procurement teams. She's got an impressive background, a PhD in philosophy, and Ravit describes herself as a former academic philosopher and has spent years researching the social and political impact of science and machine learning. This curiosity and deep thinking led her to the AI industry with one main goal: to make AI responsible. And she didn't stop there. Ravit founded Tech Better to put her ideas into practice. And through Tech Better, she's helped organizations embed AI best practices into their business strategies, ultimately boosting reputation, compliance, and even revenue. Ravit has built an impressive LinkedIn community, which I'm sure many of you are already a part of, with her recent posts on aligning the EU AI Act and NIS2 gaining thousands of engagements in its own right. Her insights into a unified framework have sparked meaningful discussions, emphasizing the need for cohesive AI and cybersecurity strategies in today's digital landscape. On a personal note for me, I think what sparked my interest about Ravit is her unique dual approach. At Vendict, we are focused on automating compliance intelligently, and I saw the same philosophy with Ravit. She's not only focused on what's responsible AI should look like in theory, but how AI should work in the real world, in businesses, within teams, and across departments. And as AI becomes a part of our everyday work life, she's here to help us understand how to make it work responsibly and effectively. So welcome to the webinar, Ravit.
Hi, what a great intro. Thank you.
No problem. And also joining us today to further enrich this conversation, we're honored to have Mads Nielsen co-hosting. He's a risk lead. Mads has a profound understanding of information, security, risk identification, exposure analysis, and mitigation strategy effectiveness. And don't ask me to repeat that again. Many of you remember Mads from our previous webinars. It's fantastic to have you both with us. Hi, Mads. So enough of the intros. Let's get started. We have a large audience and ready to really kick off. So to hand it over to you, Ravit, to get us started, how did your journey in philosophy and AI ethics bring you to the work that you're doing today?
Yeah, that's a great question, because people sometimes think that people should come with computer science background into this space, but actually, I mean, they can, but not necessarily. For me, within philosophy, I was studying science, and I was specifically studying all the ways that social and political values are integrated into science. And I was thinking, what about this new discipline of machine learning? People think it's somehow devoid of those social political influences, but it's really not. So I started with just, can we just expose this a little bit? Can we see exactly how this discipline is actually very much politically loaded? And then after a while, I realized I don't want to be pointing it out. I want to be changing it. So that's when I decided that, I'm going to go into industry. That's what I'm going to do.
A bit of a eureka moment for you.
Yeah.
So if we're looking at frameworks and regulations, which I guess falls into some of your remit in AI ethics, it's always been central to compliance and security. But with the rise of AI, it feels like industry regulators are rushing to put a whole array of regulations in place. So on one hand, that's really encouraging, right? It shows regulatory bodies are trying to take the lead, something they're often criticized for. But at the same time, there seems to be a lack of coordination or a unified approach. Would you say that's a fair analysis and assessment?
Yeah, it's a very fair assessment, and it's true and problematic on different layers. One is the global level, because different countries have different approaches. But also within each country, there might be sub approaches. So in the US, for example, different states, different cities have different approaches. But because AI is not a technology that is confined to a location, it gets really problematic, because then the companies have to deal with multiple regulations in multiple jurisdictions.
So I guess the way that America is made up on a federal and local level, that changes things.
Yeah. Yeah, well, federal, local, and also a federal, state, and also city, and sometimes it might be the county even, right? And so there might be inconsistencies between a city in New York and a city in Texas, right? Just as there are inconsistencies about the other laws, right? But when it comes to AI, then it becomes really tricky, because the companies are going to have to figure out how to abide by both if they want to serve customers in both states or cities or whatever it might be.
Absolutely. Okay, so that's very interesting in itself, especially.
I'm getting a bit of a lag. I don't know if it's on my end.
I'm getting a little bit, but
yeah, just to let you know that I'm getting this lag.
Sorry. Okay. Well, I'll speak a little bit slower. So it's interesting, especially Mads and I coming from a European approach a little bit. It's good to hear your perspective over the pond, as we say. But what are the leading approaches to AI regulation worldwide and right now? And perhaps you can explain how we got here, the journey from where we started today to today's AI policies right now.
Yes, sorry, I'm dealing with my internet. I'm trying to get rid of this lag and disconnection. Give me 1 second. I'm sorry about this.
No problem.
I'm just gonna switch. I'm gonna switch networks here and hope for the best.
Mads, perhaps you want to speak a little bit about, I guess, your background whilst we wait for Ravit to reconnect. But we met on previously, but it will be good to hear from the audience to understand a little bit about where you're coming from, so that when we actually talk more to Ravit, then we can understand a little bit more about your perspective, especially from the risk side of things. It'd be great to hear a little bit about you. Mads might be on mute, I think. Yeah, I'm having trouble hearing you. Good old. Hi, Ravit. Are you back?
Yes, it should be better now. I'm sorry.
Yes. Okay, so you're good.
Yes.
Am I good?
Yes, Mads, I can hear you as well. Okay, so let's re-engage. Okay, Mads, we'll just give you a chance to answer on your end. And Ravit, give you time to come back in. We're talking a little bit about Mads's background so we can understand more about your perspective.
Yeah. So I come from an information security, risk, and compliance background. And the reason I think there's an intersection between me and Ravit is a lot of these regulations, they fall into existing information security and compliance departments, also legal. But what I've experienced is that we've been confronted with, there's I come from a European context. There's the NIS2, there's the GDPR before that. We have AI Act, we have DORA, data resilience, and we have a lot of new regulations around the integrity, reliability, and fairness of all of our electrical and network systems. And so we are often asked some pretty difficult questions that we're probably not used to answering. And so I look very much forward to hoping to getting some practical answers from Ravit today.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Vendict, we specialize in answering questions when it's hard to answer them in the first place. I can attest to that, especially around the world of AI regulation right now. But throwing it back to you, Ravit, perhaps you can explain, along with AI regulations worldwide, how we got here, the journey from where we started to today's current AI policies, how you see it.
So how we got to the current landscape of AI regulations?
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the beginning was some scandals that happened or that came out around 2016. I think that was a starting point. There were a couple of stories that came out. One was about the Compass, the recidivism algorithm. That was a expose by ProPublica about how discriminatory that system was. And there was another story about Amazon that came out around the same time. They had bias in their AHR systems. I think that's the point that people realize that something needs to be done, that there is immense potential of harm here. So that, to me, is how it started, through journalism. Then, in my opinion, the second thing was academia started being more active. We saw an explosion of AI ethics principles and frameworks. I think it peaked around 2020. Well, that not peaked because we had so many since, but it became really kind of mainstream at that time. And as this was happening, it was trickling to regulators as well. So that's that. And I mean, of course, the tech companies as well have kind of joined the ride. There's a lot of lobbying that happens because they realize it's going to impact them deeply, and that shapes regulation differently in different regions as well. So I see it as a trajectory from journalism to academia to companies getting uncomfortable, and countries deciding what to do.
I mean, we've recently experienced the introduction of the EU AI Act, and I know that's something that's been on companies' minds, including our own clients. But I guess if you're looking at the EU and the US together, their roles in developing separate regulations around AI, maybe you can talk a little bit about those separate attempts and how this could impact companies operating across borders.
Yes, I will add the UK. So I would say that there are broadly three approaches to AI regulation. One is the approach we're seeing from the EU, which is laws that are AI specific and are overarching. So the laws of this form are going to say something like AI systems should do this, should not do that. So that's one approach. Other regions are not taking this approach. So UK really has distinguished itself, saying we don't want that because we feel it's going to stifle innovation, right? So that's the line. Instead, what we want is more sector specific and also a voluntary framework. So that's a second approach. The US is totally different, in my opinion. A lot of people think that it's like the UK. I don't think so. There is some voluntary frameworks, and one of the documents we're going to talk about today, NIST's AI risk management framework, is one of those. But more importantly, I think the US leans into existing laws. So we don't necessarily have to have new laws, right? Because some of the old laws that we have apply to AI as well. Think of non-discrimination laws, for example. Yeah, you're just not supposed to discriminate in some ways, regardless whether you're using AI or not. And so they're leaning into the federal agencies, which are responsible for enforcing those laws, which is why it's so important. Documents from NIST, right, that is a part of the Department of Commerce. This is how the US is doing things, via those federal agencies that are also giving each other advice, and then going into enforcement. In addition, we have the state laws and the city laws, which are actually really impactful. And they also are relying on the resources from the federal government.
So as a business, right? If you're a US-based business and you're working with EU and UK-based clients, what are you seeing as a company? I mean, most companies these days are international across borders. How do you see this explosion of essentially individual policies to come together as a wider remit?
Yes, because of this diversity in regulations, I would recommend do not stick to a narrow compliance mindset, right? Do not think all I need to do is comply with this or that law. You're never gonna, it's never gonna be the end, right? Because it's not just the AI laws, even it's also the non-AI laws, like discrimination laws, consumer protection laws, privacy laws. It's all of it. So really, what I think is best is to come up with a unified framework, for lack of better terms, that takes the crucial components of all of them, because at the core of them, there is a lot of agreement between those frameworks. But you have to think broadly, not just about the specific law, but how are you doing something more general that would help you with compliance more broadly, and also at the same time with your reputation and even your business model.
Okay, interesting. Mads, have you got something to specifically follow up with there?
Yeah. So so meeting requirements from multiple similar frameworks or legislations is everyone's headache at this time, I think. And I agree with Ravit that finding some common ground and aiming for that is the only way going forward. And you'll probably never hit 100% everywhere. That's just unrealistic. Mm-hmm. What I've seen being implemented successfully is identify what levers you even have to change anything in the organization. Use those and backtrack them to the requirements. Because if you do a requirements first and implement everything by the letter, you'll never get anything done but compliance. So not so much a question, but more a comment on Ravit that I agree with her approach is you need to find what can you even do, find the common denominators in general sense, and then aim for that and see how regulators are even going to enforce this, because that's also something that's very uncertain for us. So how harsh are you going to be? How literal? How much resources do we even have to enforce, right? Which is something you consider from a business perspective. How likely are we to actually get hit with any injunctions?
Absolutely. Sounds like intelligently covering the right basis is the way to go. Just checking out our polls here, it's interesting to see, Ravit, that at least half of our attendees today have seen your posts about EU and the US AI NIST frameworks. So I think we can delve deeper a little bit into that. So just to let you know, that's interesting. And thanks for the feedback in our audience. If we're looking at small and medium-sized companies, right, I'm assuming a lot of our audience represent that demographic, really. Bringing on a CISO is a dedicated security team is seen as sort of the starting point or the jump that you're taking in security and compliance and governance, right, GRC. They're then tasked with navigating a maze of frameworks and policies. Mads, you've just referenced that, right? Which ones can we choose intelligently, right, to keep on top of? It's a huge undertaking, really, that we see a lot of companies face that challenge with day to day. We've seen that play out many times at Vendict. But Ravit, let's look at your gap analysis and that document that I'm just going to share now. You've come up with the 4 key gap analysis questions that are critical, right? So maybe you can walk through a little bit about your own doc here that you've created as I get to the right section here.
13, yes. Here we go.
Maybe we can just talk a little bit about this in depth and give you the room to talk about gap analysis in general here.
Yes, I'll start with just explaining what this even is. And so you've referenced my framework, unifying NIST and the Act. Of course, that framework was also enormous. It's just a lot for someone to have to wrap their head around, which is why I've decided to simplify it, and to simplify it in a layered way, right? We want to start with something feasible and realistic especially when we're thinking of SMEs, right?
Mhm.
Start small and expand. Start with something manageable. So I'm suggesting start with these 4 questions. I boil down my entire unified framework into these 4 questions, and then if a person wants to take it one step further, then it becomes 12. So this is what it is. It's boiling down to the essence, the unification of the act from the European Union and NIST from the US. So here are the 4 questions. If you're going to get started with AI governance, I suggest starting with these 4 questions. One is about discovery. What do you do to understand the AI's purpose, impacts, and requirements? You'd be surprised how sometimes that is actually the weak point. I think in terms of common sense, people maybe expect, oh, we have this covered. Not necessarily. Really not necessarily. Especially there are a lot of blind spots. This is something I'm noticing very often because the company will say, oh, we know that fairness is important. It's so important. Da, 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 da. Yeah, but you forgot about privacy. Yeah, but you forgot about explainability. It's really important to take a moment and think about this in a systematic way. And ideally also with diverse stakeholders, not only in terms of demographics, but also in terms of their positioning towards the company. Talk to your customers, right? Make it a part of your customer discovery. Talk to your employees, talk to your investors. So discovery is the first thing. Second thing, which is really important, is measurement, which again, it may sound commonsensical, but in reality, I find that measurement comes last, just sequentially. This is what I'm seeing in companies. The question really in measurement is, now that you know what impacts are really important for you to focus on, given your context, given your values, given your business model, how do you know how well you're doing? Are you discriminating or not? There's only one way to find out. Measure it. And in measurement, I think the go-to is just like, how do we measure, right? Important, yes, actually measure, actually do the measurements, but also make sure you do them in at least 2 places. One is before you actually deploy, right? And then second, you also have to monitor. And then third, do you have a strategy? Is the third question. I cannot stress this enough. Sometimes I think I know why so often measurement comes last. It can be difficult, but again, start small. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Just choose a metric. Just start with that, right? With the consultation of the stakeholders and everything. Third thing is the mitigation. That is something that I am seeing most commonly happen to varying degrees, right? It's not necessarily perfect. Often it's far from perfect. But when we're talking about mitigation, it's about how do we minimize either the actual negative impact that is happening or the risk that it would happen. And I recommend focusing on 3 things. One is the actual reduction of the negative, but also tracking issues that come up in a systematic way that you can analyze and understand and address. And then third thing, have a strategy, Third thing is accountability. At organizations, what will make things succeed or fail is whether the organization is able to support it, right? As an organization. Often I talk to companies, to people, and they'll say, tell me which algorithm to use. Like, it's not about the algorithm. I mean, it is, but later. First, it's about the organization and how well prepared it is. Because if it is well prepared, you have talented people in your company. They can make a lot of progress if everything is structured in a way that facilitates that. So for accountability, the question is, what do you do to facilitate internal and external accountability? Mm-hmm. And I'm including 3 sub-questions here for those who want to take it, one level deeper. Policies, what do you have? Structures, what do you have? What kind of roles do you have? Compliance and assessments, do you want to do audits? How often? Are you actually legally required? Sometimes you are to do audits. And then transparency on notification to all of the relevant stakeholders, including your, the end users and everyone else who might be impacted. And at the bottom of this page here, you can see maturity levels. These are also based on NIST, and they can help you think through where you're at in governance based on those 4 questions. So it's starting with no activities at all. This is not about shame. This is just about, this is where we are. And many companies are at that place. It's great. It's a starting point, right? Build up from that. And then ad hoc activities. So it kind of happens here and there, but it's not systematized. Continuing to, some structure is beginning to form, right? And then, this is very structured. And then at the end, it's adaptive, which means that not only is it structurally embedded in the company, but also they adapt, right? They revisit their strategies and they update them, given all the changes that happen. So that's in a nutshell how I'm thinking about AI governance.
It's a really good nutshell and really clearly explained. I think from an outsider perspective, right? I'm not a GRC expert or a risk expert, but when it's framed like this, when it's coming from people who understand, what's actually great is you stop the panicking and you start the planning and the strategy, which is what you've spoken about, right? You start to look at it in a slightly different perspective and understand that it's not about creating something that's all encompassing and has bells and whistles. It start at a point, be consistent, and try and build from there, which I think is a really good message that you've said a couple of times now. On maturity levels, where maybe you can explain a little bit, where do most companies lie on this line here?
Yeah, almost all companies that I have seen through my consulting and my research are somewhere between no activities and some structure. Mm-hmm. There are people in companies in the adaptive category, but it's very few of them. There's something maybe disappointing about that to some people who have AI ethics expectations, but I think it can be a great comfort to companies who might feel, we're not doing enough, and they might feel deflated. But I say, no, it's okay. Look, we're all getting started, right? Mm-hmm. It's like investments, right? People say the best time to invest is 10 years ago, but the second best time is right now. And so the same for AI ethics. Don't let any kind of I don't know. I notice this very often, that people feel kind of intimidated and they feel everyone is doing better than me. Well, some are, yes, but the point is you can get better. So the vast majority of companies are somewhere that I've seen are somewhere in the ad hoc territory. Some are more like in some structure. So that's where we are currently in the industry.
Sounds good.
Can I jump in here, James?
Yes, please.
Yes, I'm looking primarily at discovery and measurement, which probably reveals where I am on the maturity level. But I have a few cases, some I have practical experience with, and some who received some public attention in Denmark, where I'm situated. So the first two cases are, I guess, what most people would be familiar with is we would like either some new features in our products, or we would like to optimize our products or services by using AI in some way, right? Where I'm currently employed, we do simple web hosting and website building and that kind of stuff. And we've introduced AI writing assistants for people to have, automatically created websites, right? So I would say from my vantage point, that's fairly low risk activity. No lives as at risk, or a few wrong words here or there probably won't. But if you could put some words to that, and afterwards, I've also worked in a company that provided solutions to the consumer banking sector, right? Where there's a lot of potential for optimizing a lot of services, a lot of apps, investments, financial advice, that kind of stuff, from actual AI and machine learning of a bunch of data that resides within that sector. And what scared people a lot is that we need to consider all these harms, societal harms to individuals, and all of that stuff that can now go on because we're using AI. And as you mentioned, Ravit, there's this this underlying panic where we don't know what to do. So maybe you can help me with sort of classifying those two AI examples, the writing assistant and maybe a financial advisor, and then talk about what harms that what should be considered.
Yeah, this is such an important question. This is at the discovery stage, really, right? Like, how do we identify those risks? I think that the best way to cultivate that skill is through practice. So I'm going to use this opportunity to give myself a shout out. I'm going to use this opportunity to give myself a shout out because I think the best way to learn it is hands-on. I've actually developed a game to try this out where I've AI generated a company, and in the game you interact with them to identify those risks, because no matter what kind of guidelines I give, when it's just kind of points in your mind, that's really difficult to then later go and apply it to your company. So my meta advice is don't leave it at the level of just something that you've read on a PDF. Practice it, right? You can go to my game. That would be my preference. But also you can just talk about it with people, not necessarily about your own company or your own use case. Just talk about it and practice it. But to your question, to actually answer your question, so for people who are kind of new at this, there are two starting points that I would recommend. One is doing a red team exercise of what could go wrong, right? If someone writes something about me in the news and it's bad, what would it be? Those kind of questions. Just do this kind of exercise. Another approach that I would recommend is starting with some themes, some dominant themes that people talk about in the domain of AI ethics, right? So NIST, for example, if you go into the RMF, they list, I think 7 areas or something like that. And you just look at how they define it. Just go one by one and think, how are they applicable to my use case? And so now I'm just going to apply this to the actual question that you asked me, which is, those use cases, financial advisor, and website. With the website, I'll start with that. There are 2 things that kind of come to mind for me. Fairness is something that I think of first, because of my own value set. But when it comes to fairness, it actually can really impact websites, right? Because on websites, it's basically a marketing platform, right? So the language we choose really matters. We don't want the language to be discriminatory, right? We don't want the images to be discriminatory. And that's something that could easily happen when we generate that content with AI. But it's avoidable. That's the good news. There are plenty of things we can do if we are aware that this can happen, right? Second thing that I would say for websites is copyright issues. Again, when we generate images, we can have those copyright issues. And in fact, there was a story with Lego that happened around April, I think, where they did generate images with AI, and turned out the images contained artifacts, objects that they don't sell, and also contained logos that they don't own, like someone else's logo. So you don't want that. And if you just kind of push things into the AI and it's like gives you your website, you might end up with those photos that are copyright violating and discriminatory and potentially offensive. So that's for the website. For the financial advisor, I would say accuracy or validity. This calls it reliability and validity, robustness, whatever. They have various names. But if it's a financial advisor, you kind of need to get the numbers right. It's kind of going to be an issue if it's not going to be right. Yeah. But the thing is, it can be really difficult, because when you interact with a generative AI, there's this feeling of confidence, even though I know better, and yet I get this calming feeling of confidence, and I don't necessarily check. It's a huge issue for a financial advisor app. So that would be the first one that I would target there. Not to mention discrimination, which to me again is a go-to. You don't want to give different financial advice based on someone's irrelevant characteristics. No,
agreed. Okay, that was a couple of things that I haven't thought about. And then if we go to the measurement side of it, I agree completely that I see a lot of people waiting until after a project to defining some kind of metrics, because they think that's the hardest. And the metrics are not hard. Actually measuring something is very difficult. But until you do it, in my opinion, you're not really knowing anything about your problem. So you need to define, what's important metrics, and what you've already presented here are some, I think, very good examples of some relevant parameters to explore with some metrics. But a measurement game is usually very expensive. It can be, at least, especially if you want to measure a before and after, and you want to have confidence that whatever intervention you made is the cause of the change, right? This is a scientific problem. So do you have any, measurement is always difficult. So do you have any, recommendations on, should we pick a lot of different measurements? Should we pick a few ones and just stick to those, and what to do from here? Because you can measure, just about anything.
Yes. I'll go with, don't be the perfect, be the enemy of the good.
Mhm.
Again, it's okay, it's not perfect, right? But it's better that you're doing something, in my opinion. Second, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. And something really good that we're getting from academia is a lot of research on similar questions. So for me, that's my go-to. I'll look for research papers from people who have specialized in this, right? And there are a lot of papers, for example, studying bias in generated images, right? So why would I come up with my own measure? I found 8 papers that do this. Why don't I see the measures they come up with, right? And I already have my setup. I already have my method, right? And that already really shortens my path. Second, sometimes experiments in-house can be easy. So I saw this really great report from the Australian government a couple of months ago, because they wanted to buy an AI tool that would summarize documents for them, public feedback for them. And so they hired an external company to do it for them, but you can do it in-house as well, where you just give some people that you trust, they're going to summarize it. And then I think they only use, and then you have some AI summarize it, and then you compare, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's, you can do a small scale version of it. Is it going to be perfect? Of course not. Is it going to be better than nothing? Yes. Okay,
that sounds good. Doing it small, seeing what can work, and then you can always scale from there, perhaps, which is generally also a good.
And rely on what's already out there, so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Right. That's good. You please stop me, James, right? If I'm
no, it's really interesting.
My mandate.
I'm just pulling out that line from Ravit, actually. Don't let the perfection be the enemy of the good, right? And reiterating that, start somewhere, be consistent, and build. And I think that is something that I'm going to hold on to, not just in this concept, but also in marketing too. Just to note from our audience, first of all, thanks for all the questions. I think maybe we can try and answer a couple here, Ravit, and then we'll use it at the end. Just to also let you know, the webinar will be shared from everybody who is attending and everybody who's signed up. We will get that webinar out to everybody, as well as Ravit's document here as well. So we will share that around. I have a question. A few questions here, actually. So I will just go through them. First of all, Susan said that she loves the online game, the game that you provided. So just to let you know, and you have some fans coming in from as far as Peru, which is quite amazing. I mean, I've loved Peru for a long time, mostly because of Paddington Bear, but it's amazing we have people from across the world here. So Andre actually says, how does ISO 42001 standard compare with the current regulations we are currently seeing in the US and the EU? I guess that's a question directed to, the value of each. Maybe you can give an opinion from your side, Ravit.
Yes. So for those who are not familiar, the ISO standard is the third. There are 3 influential documents, most influential documents. It's NIST, it's the EOI Act, and then the third one and newest is ISO. I actually aim to incorporate ISO as well at some point, but I haven't done it yet for 2 reasons. One, it's behind a paywall, and I feel that these things should be free. Second, it is very much aligned. I think ISO, the upside that people talk about is that they feel that it gives more specific action-oriented advice, but the spirit of it is pretty much the same. So I don't think someone is missing out if they're not using ISO. But I know a lot of people, the reason they want to use ISO is because ISO also gives certification. So now, I think, as far as I know, that's an aspect that appeals most to people, but not because of the content.
Interesting. No, that makes sense. We have a great question here from Natalie, actually, just reading through it. She'd love to hear more about your perspective of the use of AI in hiring today. You mentioned the Amazon case, which was, she said, in 2016. I don't know if it's the same one. I wonder what is happening today in regards to discrimination in hiring. And her question is around the current reality of AI right now and hiring right now. I guess that's her challenge.
Yeah, I'm really concerned about AI in hiring. One reason, because we already saw what it can do. Another reason, there is a law in New York City saying that we have to do impact assessment when we use AI in hiring. However, it's too easy to bypass that law. And so that's a huge issue. A third reason that I'm very concerned is because of the boom of generative AI. I'm seeing companies that had AI tools before switching to relying more and more on generative AI instead of the AI, like the traditional, like non-generative AI engines they had before, but they don't realize the discrimination that is embedded often in using generative AI. So one of the examples that I think everyone should know, again, with the research, because researchers are really exposing important issues, but what happens if you try to write a reference letter with generative AI? Same CV, change the name to a female name or a male name. You know exactly what's going to happen. You're going to get different verbs, different nouns. Guess who's the genius? Guess who's friendly? But people don't realize it. They definitely don't measure it. And so it becomes kind of a bit invisible, but the social impact is enormous. So I'm really concerned about the HR domain.
Interesting. Might be our next webinar. Who knows? No, completely. And look, I guess this is part of. We're still in the very early stages of understanding the capabilities and the impact of AI, both individual and on a business level. That's just HR is just one area, obviously. A question here from Marav. She's looking at the measurements from the four areas that we're talking about here. She thinks it's significant to add the component of its integrity, making sure that it's objectively observed by an entity which is external to the process or system. I guess that's her statement. Otherwise, you'll be sidetracked due to wrong findings. Is that something, a consideration here?
Yes, it is number 11.
Okay. So
yeah,
this is compliant and assessments.
Yeah, and if you get the PDF, it also has the detailed 12 questions. So yeah, definitely.
Sounds good. And just one question quickly before we move on, because I'm aware of the time we're coming towards the end of the webinar. So Gianfranco here says, what particular aspects should be considered to ensure adequate governance of AI in the public sector?
In the public sector.
Yeah, I mean, that seems like a very large answer.
No, because this is a question that is close to my heart. So I really appreciate that it came up. Procurement is what I would emphasize for the public sector. It's important not only because they're going to be using those tools, so they're already obligated, right, by procurement laws. They have to protect the public that they're serving, right? So in my opinion, by current procurement law, they're already obligated, to ensure responsible AI governance. But second reason it's so important is because they have so much money. And they can shift the ecosystem in a more responsible direction if they start procuring, with responsibility in mind.
Interesting. Okay, so I hope that answers really concisely. I think we might do Ravit a little bit of a Q&A as a follow-up in general, because we're getting a lot of questions here, and we'll figure out how to answer them all in our own time, because I know time is tight. I just want to take a quick look at real world impact. especially because this is your expertise, right? Going from theoretical to the real world impact. Perhaps you can talk about some of the challenges that you've seen with clients or with business entities that you're working with, and you don't have to give names, right? But how have you taken that from a theoretical element to practical element and installed that with clients? But maybe you can talk a little bit about those practical challenges that you've encountered from the theory that you built.
Yes. I'm just thinking where to get started. I think the biggest mistake is to start top down, to take some framework, no matter which one, and say to the organization, here's your framework, bam. No, it's never going to work. It doesn't work even in the large organizations, right? They come up with those frameworks, they take a year. Let's take a year, make this fancy framework. And then what happens? Fizzles out, or it's unimplementable, right? And then the employees don't do it. So I take the opposite route, bottom up, and try to integrate with where the organization already is. How are they managing risks generally? We don't want to make AI responsibility an add-on, right? We don't want to make it another thing, but find where it sits currently in the company. For example, maybe they have a CISO, right? Chief of Information Security. Maybe it's the CISO who should do it, right? As a part of general risk management, right? And then the question is, how do we embed, right? How do we adjust? We take those 4 questions or 12 questions and put them in the way of thinking of the current risk management in the company. To me, that is the key. If it's not down, then it's going to fall by the wayside. That's one point. Another point, companies may start really having good intentions and then nothing happens when it's not integrated into the business strategy, right? If they feel like, oh, we're doing this because it's the right thing to do, but we're not making money off of it, or whatever payoff they want, and whenever there's a pressure from that, oh, there's a customer crisis, oh, we have a release, what's gonna fall between the cracks? Yeah, it's the thing that no one feels is a part of anything. So it's really important to integrate it in the business strategy. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. And to me, a great way to do it is by collaborating with the marketing team. Of course, we want to avoid ethics washing. That is bad. But if the company is doing something right, why not build on it? Why not proactively get that positive reputation? And then suddenly you have an internal stakeholder that is giving you an actual deadline that you have to meet, right? So my 2 recommendations for practicality, start bottom up is my opinion, and then make sure it's in your business strategy.
And nothing gets done in the company without marketing. I think I can support that statement as well. No, the really interesting insights. Final 2 questions that we have, and I think we can be quite quick with these because people are given such great time to this, and I want to finish on time. Building on the practical challenges that we're seeing, right? Given how much infrastructure today across companies, small, medium, and large, relies on the cloud, how should organizations approach security requirements with their cloud providers? Is that something that you look at on a regular basis, Ravit, in your experience?
People don't think about this enough. That's the reality of it. But when you use AI, you may be vulnerable to a whole new set of challenges. Or even because of the availability of AI to hackers, it changes the game. New attacks are possible. Yeah, I have a good friend who is in security, in cybersecurity specifically, so I'm always hearing about the new ways to attack with AI. It is something that is very important. I think it's really increasing the stakes for security. Having a secure cloud becomes, in my opinion, even more important. And then another aspect is environmentalism, because where are those servers that are doing the processing for you? What kind of energy are they using, right? It can have enormous environmental impact.
Well, yeah, you're keying into the response that we've just got here about AI compliance concerns, and 55% of people are saying it's about the complexity, and we're seeing this across the questions that we're asking and your answers that you're replying with, this level of complexity that AI is bringing seems to be the concern. And I think when we're talking about expert advice, like we said, where to start is key, but also where to stop is, or where are your remits is also particularly important, right? Like keeping a handle on everything. So your answer is tying into what our audience is also concerned about. I want to give one last question here. I think it's important before we wrap up here. What advice would you give to companies looking to navigate frameworks and regulations, especially referencing the EU AI Act and other like-minded policies coming up on the horizon?
Yeah, if you do one thing, make it discovery. Sit down with someone external to help you understand some of the risks and what you can gain also business-wise. I find that often this is the biggest barrier at the beginning.
Perfect. Mads, I'm going to give you perhaps the closing take on this. From for everything that Ravit has spoken about today, what stood out for you?
I think it stood out that, when we're especially in cybersecurity, we are concerned with adversarial and unintended consequences. And I think that Ravit's approach to think commonsensically about it, talking to external actors to saying, okay, we're having this problem, what can you see would go wrong? And having this initial, as you say, Ravit, discovery of what is the problem space. And that's at least a starting point. And then you can go from there. And to not start mapping everything out at once, just taking one step at a time, seeing what seems sensible at this point, how can we deal with that, and then take on the next problem. I think that makes it a bit less daunting getting in this wrestle with all of this, I have to say, insane regulation, right? So thank you, Ravit. It makes it a bit more easy to approach, simple to approach at least. Yeah.
Yeah, we talk about that confidence with AI and with regulations, and it seems like, Ravit, you've got experience helping people through that, and especially companies and departments. It's mission critical, right? I think that's going to bring us to a close. I want to address a couple of things. One, like I said, halfway through, the webinar recording is going to be available for everybody, so look out for that. We will try to send it to you as how we engage with you. So that's likely to be on LinkedIn or via email. So keep a lookout for that. It will come from Vendict or myself, James. We will also be including Ravit's PDF that she took us through before. So that's going to be available to everybody too. Also, you might not have experienced Vendict before, but if you want to learn more about us and how we help intelligently automate compliance, check us out at vendict.com. You can learn more. I am not from the sales team, so this is not a sales pitch, but just a friendly marketing nudge. So I want to, first of all, lastly, take a big thank you to Ravit and to Mads. Thank you so much for joining us today. You've been brilliant, and I could listen to you for another hour. You're just really insightful, and we'll try and do this again sometime soon, and help make sure the audience gets in front of you again, because there are so many questions flying in, and we will try and get them answered as well, Ravit, if that's okay by you. I'll make sure we get in touch with the people who didn't get that question answered quite today. But thank you very much for all your time, and it was a real pleasure.
Yeah, I wanna thank you, James, specifically for being a great host, and also Mads and Vendict for making this possible. And then everyone who came, I'm seeing some of the names in the chats that are very familiar to me, and I feel like I have this great community, and you make me feel at home no matter where, which webinar I'm at. So thank you for coming and for your questions.
No problem. I hope we see each other again soon. Take care.
Yes.
Take care.